Hello, and welcome to the Divas and Decaf podcast. My name is Sasha, and today I'm doing a solo episode to talk about the book series Artefacts of Ouranos by Nisha J. Tuli. Here's the first book we'll be talking about, Trial of the Sun Queen. So I rated this 9 out of 10. I like to rate my books out of 10. I know Goodreads is out of 5. I really liked this book. I thought it was fast paced and really kept my interest, and it was an easier read, so I was able to get through it pretty fast. Um, so this podcast is going to be for people who have already read all the books and would like to see maybe if we have or had some similar thoughts as we were reading them and what we thought of the books. So, Trial of the Sun Queen. At first I thought they were switching point of views. At first I thought Laura and Nadir might be brother and sister because they both had like dark skin and black hair, and they both seemed a little wild. We do find out that that is not true eventually. I also thought that like Willow and Tristan were like more normal names, and then Laura didn't really fit in with their names, but Laura and Nadir seemed more of the same type of name. So that's kind of why I was thinking along those lines. As Ryan is looking for lore, I decided that with Nadir and his sister, Lore would not be like a half sibling because I didn't think Ryan would care that much about a half sibling because he doesn't seem to care about his kids like too much. So then I was starting to think like maybe that's not the case. As I was reading Atlas, which is the Sun King. At first, he seems to make like a good impression. He's like the golden, copper-haired Sun King who seems very interested in lore for some reason. And as I was reading, I couldn't tell if he was genuine or not. If I kind of like I had a little bit of an inkling that he wasn't, and then I noticed that in one of Nadir's point of views, he commented on how Atlas was like fake or it was something like that, and I picked up on that. So, as I was reading through Atlas and lore and like their escapades, I kind of had that in the back of my mind of I don't really know if this guy is being genuine. Oh, I have Nadir's comment. I wrote Nadir made a comment about his pursuits being in cover by the trials, so that I don't know, maybe he's kind of like a playboy or a charmer. So I was starting to get those vibes based on that comment that Nadir made. Then I started to get some clues about lore. They're talking about the fallen realm and queendom of heart. So I wrote that maybe lore is from the fallen realm of heart. Her red stone is definitely something from her background, and red goes with the heart theme. I also made a note of how the sexism is making me very mad. It was 10 women competing for one guy. There was a quote that's saying, oh, he's only just a man, and then Gabriel slapped Lore's butt. And so I was kind of getting irritated about the men and the way that they were acting, let's say. Then, as the book went on, I wrote Laura's definitely from heart. She's probably royalty since Ryan seems to be looking for her still. And then I thought, well, Laura could be related to Nadir still because Nadir thought she smelt familiar. And they're both like very emotional people, kind of like reactive, I guess. I was still thinking of that because I was like, why does she smell familiar? Is it because it's a long lost sibling, or what's the deal with that? They get to the part of the book where Lore needs to find the trinket, the royal trinket for the sun trials, and they're at the dance, and she ends up dancing with Nadir, and there's definitely a lot of tension. And so I wrote, is Nadir going to bond with Lore? So I thought, okay, these two probably aren't siblings. They are probably going to have some sort of romantic interest. Also, towards the more end of the book, Lore is alluding to this like secret or secrets that she's been keeping. So I was guessing that Lore actually knows she's a fae. I'm still questioning what her secret is. Is she a fae? Is that the secret? Is it something else? That's kind of what was going through my mind as I was reading it. Then my last note I have is that Lore is the Heart Queen, and then I kind of had a theory that the Heart Queen that demolished the world and ruined the world, maybe she wasn't the rightful Heart Queen, and that's why that happened. So those were overall my notes that I made as I was reading Trial of the Sun's Queen. Like I said, this was my favorite book out of the 4 books. I rated this one the highest. Rule of the Aurora King, the green one, this was the next book. So I ended up rating this a 7 out of 10. And I said that the romance aspect of the book was an 8 out of 10, but the plot I thought for me fell a little bit short, and I gave the plot a 6 out of 10. So I kind of averaged and made a 7 out of 10 rating. They're in the manor. Nadir is kind of like holding Lore captive. They have all this tension, and I think it's Mael is like, "Oh, this is your sick way of foreplay," and they have all that going on. She hates Nadir, but then there's this tension that you're kind of like picking up on as you read. So then Nadir does come through, and he goes and gets Willow and Tristan, and then they have this big meeting with Nadir, Anya, Lore, Willow, Tristan. I don't remember if Hyleen and Mael were in on this meeting, but they have this big meeting, and I'm expecting this big like jaw-dropping twist or secret or whatever. And so when they have the conversation of exposing all the secrets, finally exposing these secrets, I was kind of disappointed with the conversation. It fell a little flat for me. The world building was not as detailed or thorough or in depth as I would have liked. And also like the rules of the Fae, I thought they were kind of generic. The part where the mom had lived in the woods with the kids and was keeping them a secret, raising them there. I thought that was kind of like uncreative. So that's kind of how the book started off, and I was like kind of like that's just my opinion, but moving on. I really enjoyed the tension of the book between Laura and Nadir. I liked that a lot. I thought that was really well. It was steamy. There was lots of tension. There was a lot of anticipation, and it was kind of like dragging out with these like opportunities and then them not taking it for whatever reason. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the book, but as I was reading, I was not very invested in the actual plot. And this is at the point where it's decided that Lore will go to the keep with Nadir to look for the crown. Okay, then it gets to the point where Lore talks to, I think it's the staff at the Aurora keep, and it tells her that the path going towards Nadir will, quote, it can only end in heartbreak and ruin, end quote. So my theory for that part of the book was that Nadir will die fighting his father to protect Lore. That was my theory of what would happen. I thought Anya, she was kind of giving like Alice vibes from Twilight. If she's like the fun sister that everybody loves, and she's just kind of charming because of the way she is. So I was getting those like Alice vibes. I thought when they revealed the name of the high priestess and they're talking about Cloris Payne, I thought that Cloris Payne should have had a better name because she's like the high priestess. And so I thought maybe she should have like a more whimsical name. Yeah, I wrote that Circe is a bitch. She's not pleasant. She's super greedy, super selfish. not nice to her mom. At this point, I am pretty sure that as the book goes on, Laura and Nadir and all their tension and how their magic seems to like crave each other, I'm pretty sure that they have a mate bond. I loved all the tension and the anticipation, but then it almost got to be a little bit too much where I was like, okay, Laura, now you're just making me mad because you're repeatedly turning this guy down who is obviously really into you, and your magic is craving him, and maybe it could be really magical if you actually went there with him. So I wrote, Lore is peeving me off just to give in to your mate already. Say he's yours, for heaven's sake. She keeps saying, like, I will not be I will not be his. I will not be his. I'm like, turn it around. Say that maybe instead of him saying you're mine, say you're mine, Nadir. Like, why can't you just turn it around and put that spin on it? And like, I thought at that point the anticipation, um I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it, and then it was time to finally like give in, but then the author kept having Lore like, no, no, and it would just went a little too far for me, where it kind of was like, okay, now I'm rolling my eyes at this situation. I will also say Nadir, I'm loving Nadir during this book. I thought he was very like swoon worthy, very spicy. Yeah, I was just really liking his character, and I was like, yeah, Nadir, I really like him. Like, I have a crush on Nadir myself. Overall, with this book, my last note that I made was that the plot is not very thought out or creative, and I thought that the author, Nisha, her strong suit is definitely more of the romance aspect of the book and not so much the plot, the world building, the rules of the Fae or of the land. I was kind of just disappointed in all of that. Now, that's coming from a person who I really like Game of Thrones. That's really my thing. It's really in depth. There's a lot going on. It's kind of like almost hard to keep up track of what's going on because it's so like thought out and creative. And so that's like more my style, and I'm starting to get the sense that these books they're kind of like Game of Thrones. I'm wanting them to give Game of Thrones, but I'm just like not quite getting that. It's falling flat. It's not on that level for me. We get to the third book, Fate of the Sun King. So right away with this book, I was already peeved because the book starts off by saying, Lore regrets drawing that line with Nadir and saying like, I will never be yours, and that's final, where that's how it ended in the last book. And I just wrote that Lore is driving me nuts. In the first book, there was a little bit of jumping around with the point of views. Second book, there was like a little bit more. And then in the third book, it's getting even more. They're jumping around quite a bit. And I don't mind the jumping around of point of views. I just thought it was kind of like inconsistent with going back to the first book. And I don't know, maybe the author was trying to like keep it simple and then make it more complex and more complex and more complex. Maybe that was her goal, but I guess I would have probably preferred if there was jumping around and if the books were just a little bit more consistent, and then I would give them more consistent ratings potentially. I wrote that 1/4 of the way in, I was just like kind of bored of what was happening, thinking maybe she's trying to like set some stuff up for later on in the books. I'm not really sure, but I'm bored. Then I get 1/3 of the way in, and then finally like something is actually happening. This is where Lore figures out they're mates, but she is still making me mad at that point. When she finds out that they're mates, it's like she instantly gives in. And I thought that was kind of inconsistent to like what she was actually doing. So I thought she was not giving in when it was kind of obvious they're magic. So she should have kind of known that they were mates beforehand, but whatever. And then she finds out they're mates, and then all of a sudden it switches and she's super obsessed with him and super in love with him. And I just thought that switch, based on what had happened and how things were going, I just thought that switch was like super instant. And so like it was kind of rushed for me, if that makes sense. As far as the mate bond, she didn't even really question it. She just kind of instantly heard a small portion of what Rhiannon was saying, and then she just like knew. And maybe that's because she's kind of known the whole time and she just was in denial. I don't know, but I thought that maybe it would have been a little bit more interesting, a little bit more, the book just would have been a little bit more in depth if she would have like questioned the mate bond a little bit just to like make sure. The switch flipped way too fast where it kind of took away from like the plot for me. My exact note was, I know there was tension all through book 2, but after her tantrum with Nadir, it just isn't a well thought out plot, in my opinion, for it to switch so fast like that. It was also kind of annoying me, and she did this in the 4th book too, the author. Whenever someone needs to get up to speed with information in the book, all the author does say is that, oh, well, we explained it. Oh, well, they explained it. All she wrote was that it was explained. She didn't have like any quotes of how it got explained. She didn't even touch on that. And for me, it just kind of seemed like it was like a shortcut in her writing where, or like lazy in her writing, maybe. You don't have to go through and fully explain everything and have this like super long conversation explaining it, but would feel like maybe you could have a little bit back and forth and then say that they explained the rest, or something like that, just so it wasn't like didn't they explained it, didn't, maybe it could be like didn't they talked about it a little bit, then they explained the rest, didn't. Like to me that would have been more thought out. Because of that like writing style, it kind of almost seems like the book is like skipping parts, so it's like going from here to here and it's just like skipping to it rather than having the progression the way it should be and having it kind of like flow better. And I wrote, I get that it's not to make the book too long, but it annoys me for some reason. I don't know, it just annoyed me. I wrote that Mael is funny. I liked Mael a lot. I thought he had some witty remarks and I really enjoyed his character. And then I was trying to like mull over the heartbreak and ruin as the book is going on as well. I was making kind of like a theory and having some questions. Will the mirror be right and Laura and Nadir are doomed, or will they find a way to bond properly? But at this point we know that they're mates. My next note was, I knew it was Cloris when they talked about the limp as she was limping around, going from the point of view from in the history to the present. But I did not even realize that the brothel's name was Pain. Like, I didn't even put that together until they said it, and I was like, duh, Sasha. I'm getting to the 75% read mark. I'm starting to think, okay, well, the book is called Fate of the Sun King. So whatever's happening, this must wrap back around to Atlas. And what's going to happen with him at the end of this book is kind of like what's going through my mind. So then I was trying to make some theories about that. I wrote the book is called Fate of the Sun King. Atlas must get exposed. By who? Maybe by Cloris. And then we get to the part where Lore meets the Imperium. Okay, so I thought the Imperium was so dumb and just uncreative and lazy. I just I just was rolling my eyes. I thought it was kind of cheesy and kind of like a cop out for having more of a plot and having things more well thought out. It was just like, oh, here's just magical being that switches faces and then they're here sometimes and they're working on other things other times. It didn't really do it for me. This is where I start to think, how could this book series be better or like hit better for me? And I kept this thought going through the 4th book as well. I was starting to think, I feel like this series for me would have been better if it was maybe like a 6-book series and the world building and the magic and the rules and the plot were more in depth and more detailed, because I was like, I don't know, maybe it's supposed to just be more of a romantasy, heavier on the romance. For me personally, it's kind of like giving really watered down Game of Thrones. And then I made a note that she kept saying momentous. She said it like multiple times. So yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of like an overuse of it near the end of the book. My last note on this book was ending. Lore is going to get her revenge and then meet Nadir in the Evanescence to be the new Ouranos god. So that's kind of what my theory was at this point. I rated this book a 6.75 out of 10. Whew. Last book, Tale of the Heart Queen. This is the thickest book, the longest book. There was a lot to get to, as the author says in the beginning. I also ended up rating this a 6.75 out of 10. Fate of the Sun King ends with Lore killing Nadir, basically. And we're just like heartbroken, and it ends up being this cliffhanger. So then I was eager to get into the fourth book to see what happened. And then my first note is, of course, there's a way to revive Nadir. I'm glad there is a way to revive him. I just thought, like, oh, it's not actually tragic. I like a plot where it's like, I hate it, but I love it because I hate it. So then I made a note of the first few chapters. So far, I was into it. Oh, I thought that Zara trying to seduce and steal Nadir is a clever way to kind of like go about the plot. I actually liked that move by the author. So that was a good one, I will say. A lot of the parts for me just seemed really rushed, and that she was like trying to get through them and trying to get them in this book. Like, in a way, she decided it was going to be 4 books, and then she had to fit everything in, so some parts just got rushed. Lors has a convo with Coral. I thought that conversation was kind of dumb about how they had no choice but to hide the magic deep in the ground because of Circe. And I said, I get that there needs to be a consequence for Circe's doings, but the explanation just didn't really hit for me. And I felt like some of the scenes in this book were not descriptive enough for me to like fully get into them. So there was the part where Ryan is approaching and the confrontation scene. I wrote that that should be more descriptive. And this is why she should have had more books so that she could be more descriptive and you could just like picture it better and just be immersed in the world more. And then going back to Zara, I liked that she was going after Nadir and kind of like had a little bit of a drama twist in there. But I thought that her going straight to the wedding arrangements, I thought that was kind of uncreative. And then Nadir needed information from her, and she gave the information to her really quickly. And so I thought that was like, okay, that was kind of too easy, kind of uncreative on that. So then my next note was, I'm a quarter way through the book and I feel like it's already rushing to fit everything in. Even the part where Lore overpowers Zara and takes the 4 arcs was rushed and undescriptive. Then Nadir he is in Zara's realm and then he falls into the evanescence and then he's able to leave the evanescence and basically all he has to do is walk to this door and then like drop back into the real world. And I was like, okay, that was just like way too easy. Like, you're taking away the power of the evanescence if you can just like walk right out of it. And I get that there had to be an exit because Zara liked to play, as they put it in the book. I liked the idea of the god kind of like not being very godly, doesn't have the best morals, and she likes to play with the humans and whatever. I liked that aspect. But I just thought that to get out of the evanescence, it could have been a little bit more in depth. Nadir starts calling Laura lightning bugs because they have the lightning bugs all around them in that one scene. And I was like, that's a really cute nickname. I really like that, but I kind of miss all the tension from book number 2 when he's like calling her inmate and like the spicy. I understand that now they're mates, they know it, they've like fully fallen in love, they're head over heels. It's romance, it's not just tension and lust. And so I totally get that, like the progression of their relationship. But I was like, it would be nice if the books were just like a little bit more interconnected and some of that like inmate spice and hate love, like if there was a little bit of that sprinkled in the 4th book, I would have really enjoyed that. Okay, and then I was thinking about the title of the book, which is Tale of the Heart Queen, and I wrote that tale implies that Lore will end up in the evanescence. Then we get to the part where Lore like basically destroys Cloris Payne, but then she pulls back and she doesn't quite kill her. And I wrote that she should have just killed Cloris Payne. Like, come on, let's have some blood and some gore in this book. Oh, and then there's a part where they're at the Queendom of Heart and Willow is there and she's rubbing her chest and they're saying like we should really get her something to eat, like blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, she has magic. Obviously, you guys are so dumb. She has magic. That's why her chest is hurting. or she has more magic than she thought she had, I should say. But yeah, I don't know. I thought there was like some really obvious things like that where it was like you didn't have to pick up on it. It was just like kind of there. There's a part where Lore is in the room with everyone and she's kind of like telling them about the arcs and Circe and the Woodlands King. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but they tried to bond and they didn't do it right, and that's why the world ended up being destroyed. And Lore talks about how they need a high priestess to make sure to bond her and Nadir correctly so it won't like blow up the world basically. And Anemone, she's like shifting in her seat as soon as a high priestess is mentioned, and it's like, okay, obviously she's a high priestess. Laura's an idiot for not seeing that. Ryan is he is just falling apart at the seams. He's drinking. He's going off the rails. He wants Rachel. I wrote that Ryan is so unhinged about Rachel and Herrick that I almost feel bad for him. He's like the enemy of all of this. And at this point, I actually kind of feel bad for him because he's just so out of sorts and ridiculous. I don't know. There's just a door to the underworld. Like you just find the door in the mountain and then you're in the underworld. And I just thought, how convenient, how not creative. I wrote that I don't mind the underworld being part of the plot. I thought like having Zara up in the gods and she's not moral and she's kind of a bad god. I thought that was nice. And then you got the opposite, the underworld down below with the dead people. I don't mind having that part of the plot. I thought that was good. But the fact that you can just walk right in, I wrote, just make it more complicated, please. And then we get to the part where Lore and Nadir, they are ready to bond. They're going to perform the bonding. Anemone is going to perform it for them. And they're going deep into the mountain so that the virulence covers the ceremony from Zara so that Zara can't see them. And I'm like, why are you going so far into the mountain? Obviously, something bad is going to happen. You guys just keep going further and you're not thinking anything of it. Like, how dumb can you be? Then we get to the ending where Ryan has this one act of good faith at the end, but then he dies. So he had his little moment, and he had his little moment with Nadir. Laura and Nadir get to be together because Tired decides to volunteer to be the new god, and then they're going to fix up Queendom of Heart. Amya's the new Aurora queen. Willow has her magic. Tristan's going to go to the woodlands to learn how to be royalty, basically. The author had said at some point, like, don't worry, you'll get a happy ending. So I don't know. I did like the happy ending. We always love a happy ending, right? Again, I thought it was rushed. I kind of thought just overall, I've already said it, but I just think the series would have been better if it was more books, more descriptive, more detailed. I personally would have just been more into them. And then last, I just wanted to make a side note that I do like the covers of the books. I think they're really pretty. I think that the cover art is really nice on all 4 books. So overall, I think the books are worth the read. I wouldn't say like, oh, these books sucks, don't read them. If you want a romance that is like a watered down version of Game of Thrones and like way easier to follow and like less creative and all of that, you'd probably really like these books. I'm still glad I read them. I guess I was just hoping that all of the books would be on the same level as the first book. I thought the first book ended up being the best one. I'll be starting a playlist of only book talk if you're into books. Give the video a like, pretty please, and maybe I'll see you in the next one. Bye.